what's new in the last couple of years?
Oh, fuck. I don't even know if we got enough time in the podcast for that. Yeah.
The TLDR, right?
Yeah. I don't know. It's usual. Everything's all the same, but different, gradual all at once. But no, I don't know. I guess the short answer is always work.
Yeah.
The slightly expanded answer is like work and travel, although those are pretty much the same thing at this point. But yeah, just it's not even one day at a time.
I was gonna say, are you still in your you're not in any place for the same 2-3 weeks?
Oh yeah. No, 2 weeks is a pipe dream. Although when did I land back? I landed back from Tampa after like a month and a half on the road, like a few days ago, and then go off to the woods next week, and then off to St. Louis the weekend after that, and then off to Tampa, California, then Tampa, and then Seattle and New York. Yeah, it's just bad. My right eye started twitching as I was talking about it, and now it won't stop.
Wonderful.
But yeah, man.
Wonderful.
How's you're what, Chicago?
Chicago, yep.
Yeah, fucking nice. How's that? How's training?
Everything's good. So the company I work with, for however you want to word it, we actually became the first affiliated gym in the U.S. with Renaissance Creatization. So work's been crazy busy. Which is
wow.
good. Yeah. We had Dr. Jenkins out for a seminar not too long ago. So we do things kind of like side by side with their training models and diet principles. Obviously, it's not like, not to piss anybody off, but it's not like gospel Paul shit. But so we're an RP affiliated, the first one in the U.S. We're going to do more seminars with them, and my workload's crazy busy, so I'm not complaining one bit. So between that and being a single dad, I sleep very little and I drink a lot of these.
Hey, it's the nectar of the gods.
Yeah, that's right. But it's all good. I was a couple days ago listening to the show you did with Dr. Mike on academia in the industry, and the first thing I wanted to kind of touch on was when you asked him, because this was, I don't know why, but this was like my favorite part of your guys' conversation. I should say him talking, because you really didn't talk much, which is surprising. But when you asked him about the whole going after online trolls thing, I was like, I cannot wait to hear this answer, because he's so good at it in a way that doesn't shit on his image. But I feel like you don't do that at all compared to him in the least bit. And I'm like, so that was interesting to me, because you guys are very similar in how you put content out in terms of education, and you stand so firmly behind what you do. What do you do? I mean, I know you don't really give a fuck, but is there ever a time where you're looking at Killian or Junta and you're like, should I just rail this motherfucker right here, or does that even cross your mind at all?
No, don't care. Could not give a shit from a life perspective standpoint. Do you want me to go in on this? Are we recording? Do you want me to
It's recording, but you don't. I mean, you don't have to go in. But I was just so curious, because I don't obviously know you you're my fucking neighbor or anything like that. But getting a chance to chat with you and get to know you a little bit, when you asked Mike that question, I was like, this guy doesn't give a fuck. This guy doesn't give a fuck, but he's kind of an asshole in a funny way. So how is this gonna go?
Yeah,
so I was more just curious. Do you guys laugh about it, or does it even is it just all right, this is whatever?
Dude, Instagram's just a place I work. I don't really. I can't be bothered. Nothing. And I'll speak specifically to the way I've seen him interact. Nothing against. Mm-hmm. I think he does it in a very tactful way that brings entertainment, and I think that's part of the value. And I don't want to speak out of turn, and nothing but respect for what he does and what he's done. I just don't have the patience. I think I see the entertainment value of it, and I see it nothing more and nothing less as that. like there is like a WWE component to it, because
Yeah.
it's all fake. Like it's not real life. But I've always struggled with because I don't sell products based off of entertainment.
Sure.
Right? Like it would be such a bad bait and switch from a business model to be like, oh, this guy is like really, funny, or he's witty, or he's fairly sharp tongued if he needs to be. It's like, and then I sell, our business is is courses and textbooks and applied biomechanics. Like I have that serves me no purpose. So all it does is waste time from the parts of my life that I would rather engage with, rather than like, hold on, I'm going to be late for dinner because I need to write this post. Like it's just not in line with the business. It's, if anything, like, we have aspirations of, competing at the highest level with personal training certifications. And we made considerable moves towards, being a big dog at the table. I'm a firm believer of the adage, if you want to be the man, beat the man. So, we're not circumventing the steps of, that it would take to be the preeminent personal training, coaching, strength and conditioning, education platforms. We're taking and the last thing I would imagine from one of our future competitors is them engaging in some silly knife fight on the internet. So it's like, and again, I see it from an eyeballs value, but I don't want the eyeballs of people who find that, entertaining, and that be the way they, that the type of concept they could consume. I don't want to enter that into my life. Like I much rather have a peaceful life. And I find, at least if you're known to be an account that feeds those squirrels at the back door, like those motherfuckers are coming back and they're bringing friends. I'm like, I just don't have the time.
Yeah. So from what I'm getting, you kind of operate under the, like, there's enough of this shit for all of us, and you're staying in your lane and he's in his, and it's like, it works for both you guys, right?
Oh yeah. Like I don't see, and I'm sure anyone who runs,
I'm going to preface by, this isn't meant to like combat Prescript and RT. Like I see those two as, I mean, I've told you countless times, but like, I watch your shit for a reason, to learn, to be better at what I do. So I'm preface that by saying that, but sorry.
Yeah. And I just like, I'm sure on paper, like competitors are so complementary, right? Like the idea of, external sources of valid and credible fitness information is a relatively new concept, right? You used to have to get an exercise science degree and then get a master's or a PhD or go into some clinical designation, where now it's, guys like Andy Galpin, guys like Mike Israetel, guys like us, guys like Cassim Hansen, like are really putting together some incredible curriculum for people to start to sample. But how many people have taken, I cast on the podcast like a couple months ago, how many people have taken N1 and Prescript? The more that take his stuff, the more that just validate this as a means of gaining real information, real practical information. So it's like, great. The more, especially with a guy like Mike, where his platform is so big, the more people he can pull into the space, I'm sure I'm set to be the little bird that eats out of the alligator's teeth. So it's like, I don't ever see it as competition. I think we all have our own corners of the space that we operate in, and a large part of what dictates those who are in those corners is some of the decorum, some of the intangible personality traits. So it's like, I think we're all in the position that we're in because we all have some dimension outside of just the quote unquote facts or the nuts and bolts of the X's or the O's. And I see not any temptation to attempt to win that with him. I mean, I wouldn't win. Like if I tried to be entertaining and sharp tongued with someone in the comment section, it's like, dude, Israetel's is way better than that. And I just, I don't have the care or desire to be better at lashing back at people. It's like, if you don't like what I put out, it's the old unfollow button is right there. Like I pay it no mind.
Yeah. So would it be a fair question to even ask you to think about, like, if you had control over academia in our space, like how would you create the perfect Venn diagram of, like, not necessarily like content, but of these curriculum courses, and to get people to have the most out of it all to be well-rounded. Like, is that ever something you've thought about? Like, if you had the power to do that, I guess.
No, I mean, it might sound odd coming from a Canadian, but I'm as capitalistic as they come. I think free market sorts out the supply and demand, right? So it's like, I
Sure.
think what we have now in its current iteration is as close to perfect. I mean, far more than close to perfect than when I started,
Hmm.
because the end user, whether it's the coach or the consumer of a training product, past that, like if they want something, they will throw their resources at it. So it's like I wouldn't, I could come in, but like the level of hubris that would take for me to be like, I think everyone should know. Like, I mean, we have 13 courses, and I really much smarter people than I teaching them. And though that's where like I look at our curriculum and go, this is a pretty good start. But people like crystals, people like shining the sun up their butthole or putting coffee on their testicles or whatever the
Perennial
fuck.
sunning,
Or
yeah.
but it's like, like who the fuck am I? Like, am I gonna tell, like, all right, yeah, whatever. I lived in California. I've been to Santa Cruz. Like, I know these people. Cool. Like, so it's, I don't know. Like, there's too much. And it's funny because it's even evidence based. I would say the most evidence based thing we have is probably around the power of belief in some capacity, one way, shape, or form. So it's like, we've done what I think to be as good a job as we can and are continue to doing, putting together a curriculum that I think is well rounded based off of what I want to see. But like, again, who the fuck am I, right? Like, I'm just some guy. So it just, if I want to see something put in place, I'll put it in place, and we'll build the courses and the infrastructure and the marketing and the systems and the team and the story and the entire product. But other than that, it's like to sit on and I'm sure someone more qualified in our industry might have a better answer. But I like, for me personally, it's just, I think industry at large, where we're at is where we deserve to be. And I think it's a way better place. And I think it's getting better. And I think that decision is driven by consumer behavior. And that's what,
Hmm.
luckily for us, drives that. So I wouldn't want to change the way that the market auto corrects for itself, because I
Sure.
think that's what allows us to continually get better collectively, if such collective exists. So yeah, I think we're in a great spot.
I agree. And like to that point with you guys just had PSL3 come out, right?
Yeah.
So how did like industrial auto regulation, so to speak, like help you roll that out at the time that you wanted it? Like, was this the first time that you guys did that course, if I'm not mistaken?
Uh, yeah. So we did our first PSL3 cohort in the first week
Congrats, by
of
the way, for the
January.
continued growth.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Did the first one in the first week of January, and the last one just now. So
Okay.
for reference, the third week of February. So we have 2 cohorts through 7 coaches a cohort, and we'll do that again in June of this year. And we'll have another 7 and another 7. So, it's a pretty elite group, and it's a pretty,
Hmm.
I think, as far as the outcome of being a good coach and the tangible and intangible skills that you need to do that, I think it's the best. It's the best proving ground. It's the best pressure cooker. It's probably the most impactful, and it's because it's been that for me, right? Like walking into a room, pro athletes know, right? They can pick you apart because they've been coached by so many people. Like, we got
Sure.
kids that you're talking to. It's like, we have 2 kids that, a week before they came and worked with us, they were with Harbaugh or Saban, or
Hmm.
we have guys come in that get coached by Belichick, or Jesus, I don't name a coach in professional sports that matter. And we've had guys who have been coached by them, and it's like, oh, like, no, like, you are a coach. Like, you're not just a personal trainer. Like, if we want to stick to that moniker, like, it means something other than just, knowing a bunch about exercise. It's like, you need to know a bunch about people. Like Tony Doherty has, like, regardless of what industry you're in, you're always in the people business.
Yep.
So it's a lot of it is that the kids technically are really they're sound, but they're comfortable. They have a client base that trusts them inherently. They work with people who are relative to, in this case, NCAA kids who are about to go to the NFL and get drafted and
Hmm.
make millions of dollars and change their life and the life of their family forever. It's like, you don't work in high stakes scenarios. and you take someone out of their, you take someone out of their comfort zone where they're the coach, right? Like they're, because they've pursued continuing education. They've had been, financially and emotionally and personally invested into their careers. And then you put them in a room with Yo Murphy, who I know you had on the podcast recently. And it's like that guy can coach sports he doesn't know the rules to in languages he doesn't understand. Like that's how good of a communicator he is. Yeah. And you see that, and you see these, people who aren't exposed to that experience get exposed to it, but watch them adapt. And like, yeah, so the L3 for me was something that's been that was the opus, right? Like that to me is the crown jewel of what we've done, because it's actually testing against the thing that we say we're improving, right? Like, there's so many coaches out there that get so far on great communication, and so many coaches out there whose communication lacks, or their X's and O's lack because their communication lacks. Right. Yeah. So it's like that's what I wanted out of it, was like, I was having a conversation with Pat Davidson years ago, and he put it very succinctly. It's like, we are tradesmen, right? Like a plumber or an electrician. It's like, you need to put in hours, supervised hours to be a master craftsman. And it's like, yeah, that is that's what we did. We like took the best athletes in the world, and we try and line them with the best coaches in the world, and, trying to see where, like, what is the gap? Like, what is that? Where does that leave the coach in that experience? And, I think based off of being there for the first 2 cohorts, like those 6 days are quite transformative, because it really pushes coaches outside of their comfort zone, because these guys don't care what you know. They need to feel that you know that, and you need to feel that you know that. And you've never been put in a situation where you've had anything less than undivided attention.
Yeah, first of all, big shout out to Yo Murphy. I'm a big fan of that guy after talking to him for the hour and texting back and forth. I mean, not only was he able to communicate, like you said, in 7 languages and visually, but he was the most attentive person I have ever spoken to. I don't know if that guy's eyes moved off of myself the entire hour we had. He's an amazing guy. But like in terms of, so like I've been kind of reworking like how I think about coaching, because I have also worked with some aspiring pro athletes recently. Last year worked with a guy who was getting ready for the combine on an individual basis, and then I have some golfers and a couple swimmers. And what I have tried to rework myself through, this is my 15th year now of working with clients in some aspect, is like thinking of my training development as like coding, right? Like running tests, running bug tests, and then rolling out a program. So like when you guys were creating L3 off of L2 and L1, like how did you get through that like beta testing, or was the beta testing the live that you just mentioned to roll out?
No, I've been more intimately involved in the combine process for the better part of 5 years. In some way, started about a decade ago, back with Stanford and San Jose State University in like 2013. So, I definitely saw an opportunity 5 years ago when I started being there in person every year down in South Florida, understanding like, just the dynamics of college teams, of pro teams, of agents, of the process. Like, and I saw an opportunity where, from just a logistics perspective, I looked at it almost like seasonal retail, like Christmas time, Foot Locker is going to hire a bunch of people knowing full well that like, we don't need these people come Valentine's Day, right? So you're going to have some seasonal contract. And I saw opportunities going squandered, and I saw athletes going underserviced, right? These gyms would open up free internships just to get a set of hands. I'm like, that's not a way to vet, like, you charge peanuts, you get monkeys, right? And all of a sudden you have, we had 11th overall first round pick. I'm not going to name his name, although it doesn't really matter. Go to the Saints a few years ago, and I'm sitting there next to his agent and watching an intern from 24 Hour Fitness load a 25-pound plate on one side and a 45-pound plate on another, because they don't have bumper plates, and he didn't understand the difference in width over diameter. And I'm sitting next to Drew Rosenhaus, who's like, he literally has the Instagram handle @agent on Instagram. Well, he's got, I'm sure he's got 10 figures under contract, right? And like NFL agents are going to take 3%. And I'm sure, I mean, I don't know his, but he's great. Like he's one of the top agents in professional sports. And I'm sitting here going like, I need to get away from Drew's side. I need to mitigate this problem in a way where he doesn't know that it was a problem. And I also need to get that person the fuck out of this building. Right. I'm like, this is wrong, right? Like you need to have those X's and O's, right? Like you need to understand the theory, quite literally in any skill, right? Like I'm sure you've talked to Killian Hamilton before, and he's big on the skill acquisition model. I think it's something that's so just universal and everything. So it's like, well, this person is trying to do this autonomous task without the basis of the cognitive and associative skills that he would have built. So I saw an opportunity then about 4 or 5 years ago to be like, oh, okay, like I wish I had the guys and girls in my class here. And then I thought, well, I could probably do that. And I think that would be the best learning experience, because the L1 curriculum, L2 curriculum, like, yes, they're complementary, but in the same way, like there can be, as they broaden your ability to contextualize things, there are situations where sometimes information you learn is paradoxical, and then the context makes an answer right or wrong. So it's like we teach things in L1 and L2 that will give you a breadth of understanding that something you might learn in L1 might not apply to a more advanced use case in L2 and an L2, or vice versa. It's like, hey, this is actually a really simple problem. You're overthinking this. It's not, breathing mechanics and gait cycle mechanics. It's simply just do this, right? So it's it was you needed that concerted proving ground of infinite variables of context to allow people to draw from the information that you've given. Because if you just do one course, you only know a certain model of solving a problem. And then if you only do the other course, you only have this other way of modeling a problem. And what L3 provides you is, well, actually, how do you create a model, not of the body, but a model of solving problems? And that was like the missing piece. So it's like that was really what we drove for. And I think that's what we achieved. And broadly speaking, one of the biggest takeaways in solving problems with human beings is communication. Right? It's distance, it's tone, it's pitch, it's contact, it's body language. So it's been interesting. It's not, I think, what we originally expected, because again, like I learned a ton. I continue to learn a ton every time I'm in those settings. And that's where it really dawned on me, is like, oh, I'm getting so much out of this. I mean, at the time when I started, I'd have been coaching for 10 years. And been around pro athletes in various capacities, but this, learning how to run a session, learning how to keep that attention of, college kids. These kids are 20, 21 years old. So I was like, well, if I'm getting a lot out of this as someone who's relatively seasoned in this room, there's a ton to be learned here from someone who, may not have exposure to this room.
I like that. And so it makes me feel like you're coaching to teach and teaching to coach in like a very cyclical relationship. And when you mention like the 20 some odd year olds that essentially don't give a fuck because they're going to sign $1 million contracts, I had actually Robert Bailey, who is Rosenhaus's NFL VP. I interviewed him a while back, and we spoke a little bit about like how them being agents looking at, scouting combine, like what that process looks for them in turn. And we didn't really get into like how it would relate with you guys, but do you take into consideration the other eyes into the room when you're building out your curriculum for these combines, or is that's just white noise and you're doing your thing, and you and your guys have your play, you have your script, you're running it, and people observing are going to either love it, like it, have questions? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think as a short answer, I don't really like, when you know what the standard is, right? Like I know what the standard is. The standard is you're going to go into a facility that has a handful of staff that's been there, that's well vetted, that's usually very very much embodies the principle of whoever the main guy is, and they're very capable, very competent, very loyal. And then you have an influx of 20, 30 guys, and then they bring in interns with various skill sets, no standard understanding, and that's the stand. And I'm bringing in, even if, let's say, what I brought in was incorrect, like whatever incorrect look like we're making the wrong decisions. There's such a utility in the consistency of thought process, right? Like, I know if I pose the 7 people in this room with a particular problem, 7 out of 7 times, I'm going to get the exact same result, right? So that consistency allows for a standardization that then allows me to quality assure into the future, right? So I know that, our second week was better than our first. And I know that our third cohort will be better than our fourth, and our fourth will be better than our fifth. Because it's like, oh, this is, what is missing? What's falling through the cracks before we get to this point? And then I can just start to fill in those cracks, right? Where if I'm bringing in people who are like, oh, this intern group that we got has someone who flew in from like Exos, and like, wow, this dude's a fucking gun, sick. He's trying to shoot a shot, maybe make a change, maybe move to the East Coast. Or like this group, we have someone from Orange Theory, and like, not to be disparaging for Orange Theory, but like, it's a different type of vibe, right? So I can at the very least know, like, I mean, it's a little bit of a circuitous way to answer your question, but like, I know that when an agent or parent or even an athlete gets in this room, because I know what college weight rooms are like. I worked in NCAA, right? I know what pro weight rooms are like. I've been in and out of pro weight rooms for a decade now. Like, I know just the ability to have more hands that give a consistent message. I literally start off the week, both of the L3 weeks, and it was something that as I was developing the adjunct curriculum for the week, because we have lectures during the week of coaching, that I thought very pertinent to relay this message. So the first stupid story they have to hear from me all week, and there's a ton of them, is a story I tell about an ethics and jurisprudence professor I had in grad school, he was an expert witness because he was a lawyer and a chiropractor. So he was very sought after in med legal cases because he knew the law, and he also knew sort of the scope of practice. And if Ed Cremata said you were guilty of malpractice, you pretty much, you could say sayonara to your license or whatever the punishment was for your infraction. And we started noticing big dude, Goomba looking, Sopranos looking motherfucker, very well spoken, very well read, very funny, very charismatic, and very professional. Like, Addy showed up, 3-piece suit, Ted Baker tailored to the tits, like he was a G. And I started noticing that over his left breast pocket, there's a little bit of like a little fold. And I was like, my boy Eddie doesn't get bad dry cleaning. What's going on here? And he turns to the board one day, and we're looking pretty close, and he's got a fucking handgun strapped to his chest. And I was like, can we talk about this? Like, can we talk about the fact that, like, I'm in California and you're strapped in class? And because he's an expert witness, he actually has like a special conceal and carry permit, because his life is constantly in danger, right? If someone is on trial and Ed's on, the witness stand, if Ed is dead and can't tell you that you fucked up, you might be able to go free. And the only thing I remember from that class, from ethics and jurisprudence, as bad as this may sound, was, I'll tell you the only thing you need to know. And this is Ed. So Ed gets up, we talk about the handgun, and like, he's very open, it's very direct. And he goes, I'll tell you the only thing you need to know about ethics and jurisprudence, and that's 2 in the chest and 1 in the head, because there's nothing worse than another story. And I was like, that's it. Like, that's it. Right. So, and that's when I tell the coaches, and you kind of double back to your question, it's like, there's a consistency in the delivery that these athletes get, and there's an assurity and a confidence that they get from the coaching staff that's unmatched. So, do I worry about it? No, because I'm so entrenched in what the standard is that I know the intangibles that are going to far blow away expectations of the athletes, of the agents, of the parents, of the coaching. They're never going to get treatment like this again.
Sure. That's a honestly really good way to say it. That's a great story too. What like when you walked away from this year's combine session, and I asked Yo the same question, I'm curious to know yours on this. What was your biggest takeaway to build on for the 25 year? Like, it could be something that your guys did that maybe the athletes presented that was like not a new challenge, but just a new like tool? You mentioned, being a tradesman, so you're adding another tool to your belt. Like, is there something that stuck out directly to you, or maybe to Killian? Who, shout out to Killian, he's helped me again transform my training in my business. But like, did you walk away from something like that?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like what improvements, I think prefacing the communication side a lot more. I think that really blindsided people because there's a trust in a normal training coaching setting and a buy-in that's hardwired into the relationship, right? If someone comes knocking on your door as a coach, they've already said yes.
Right.
There's no consent. Like these kids, like they're so used to being poked and prodded and examined, like they just don't care, right? Like they're so desensitized. There's been so many people at that point in their life that have said 3 sets of 10 or left leg then right leg or 45-pound dumbbell or do this, do that. Like they're so desensitized to it, but like they know what good is. They don't know, they might not know all the muscles of like the adductor group, or they might not know the muscles of the rotator cuff, but they know what good is because they know what feels good. Like they know what's making them better. Like, and that's the thing about athletes is like they're so hypersensory. Like they're savants. They're literally savants with how aware and in tune they are. And the depths of that statement cannot go understated. So like they know when someone cues them into a better position. They're like, oh wow, like this is it. I got it. Okay, this guy knows their stuff. So I think it's the big takeaway for me both of the weeks, and they were tremendously successful by the end of the week. It was if we could preface them on how important the communication aspect is, that this is not your client, that you need to establish buy-in both technically and tactfully, right? So you need to be able to be confident, be direct, be stern, be supportive, also be right. And that can be a lot of balls to keep in the air when you're breathing down the, well, you're not breathing down the neck because they're fucking huge, but if you got a guy who's I don't know, our biggest cat was 6'6", like he was probably 365 when he started, he's down to 345 now. Like that's a big human being. And it's like, we got coaches coming in who have sports backgrounds in soccer or ice hockey, where it's like they've never been in a room with a human being like this. So there's so many variables that play into the communication side, that if we were to take one thing away and look to maybe steepen the learning curve for an upcoming class, it's like, you guys got it, because you think you have the right answer. Like if you sit back and you think about what the week is going to be like and what the training might look like on the field and in the gym, and we preface the guys with pretty detailed histories of the players, and we understand we have almost every scrap of these kids' DNA by the time we actually meet them. And watching the presence and the stakes and the pressure lead to hesitation, like that's where we want to narrow that curve, right? We need it to be like, oh, okay, you're in the room and you're already comfortable in the space, and that's like I've been doing it a while, so I walk in there and it's like I'm comfortable in the space. If I were to walk into I don't know, if I were to walk into a highlight locker room, I'd feel like a fucking fish out of water. Like I don't know anything. Everyone knows I'm not supposed to be here. Like everyone can tell, but it's like you need to claim ownership and authorship over that space, and that's where I think we're set to maybe improve, or at least look to like, hey guys, these are the tools you're going to want to sharpen. X's and O wise, like you're solid.
Yeah.
Like, you guys have gone through 2 very intense curriculums. You've invested so much of your time and resources into this. Like, trust your instincts, but don't let your inability to communicate and be confident in the room start to shroud and veil your right decisions. Because the second you start umming and ahhing in this room, the blood in the water, right? And these guys know the difference.
Right. So how would you, kind of circling back to like the conversation you had with Mike revolving around academia, like how would you relate that to people creating a digital presence, not just Instagram, but digital in general? Because in my opinion, and this is something I suck at. So this is both a question for me for podcast and a question for me to learn. I don't fucking understand anything about social media marketing. I am lucky that I'm in an area that I can market myself just by myself, and I count my blessings on that every day because it pays for my life. But how would you relate that, like, essentially like putting your stamp on something, making your presence, you mentioned being right, being confident, all that stuff. How would you relate that to telling your coaches to, excuse me, create a digital presence? If that's something you guys even do. I don't know if that's something that you guys focus on, you and Genta, but like it just sounds interesting to me if that's also another side of this that you guys are, developing or working
on. Yeah, I mean, our coaches all run very, very successful coaching businesses, which give us a certain level of authority because they're educators as well. And I think it's a reciprocal relationship where the success of the education business lends credence and authority and validation to them as coaches and educators. So it's a very good communal relationship we have with all of the guys who teach our courses, because they have businesses that, are incredibly successful, and they take the principles they teach and they apply them so well that their coaching businesses are what they are. They're all very, very successful in their own right. So, is it something that we actively think about? No, I think it's just a passive byproduct of, it's social media. I don't think is, I don't want to say, I don't think if it's difficult, you're doing it wrong because you're doing it against a value set or a set of motivations that aren't aligned. Right? Like I remember Poliquin put up an article once, and I think he was probably quoting someone, but it's like, there's no such thing as discipline or motivation. There's just love, right? Whatever you love to do more. Like if you love the idea of being shredded and healthy and living to 100, you'll put the cake down. But if you love the cake more than that, then cake stays in your hand. Right. So, that's something that I think, I got totally sidetracked with the Poliquin thing, but like when I think about social media, if it's difficult, you're working outside of a value set, right? Or you don't value the potential result due to some sort of unfounded short-term discomfort. I don't want to put my, we're long are the days of looking at social media and going, this is impure to the art of coaching. If anything, if you look at, I kind of look at this continuum, and I remember learning this in maybe high school. It was just like a quick rolled off the tongue of a teacher I had. And they said, marketing is the art of the 21st century. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. It was a business course in like the 10th grade or something like that. They teach you how to pay your fucking taxes. I did not listen to that course, but I heard that. I heard Mr. Wilson say, marketing is the art of the 21st century. And I was like, oh, okay. But then I started how things have advanced, and like all of a sudden, like hype became the thing that usurped marketing, right? Like now it's not even marketing. It's like hype. Is there hype around this? Right? Like look at, Jake Paul and all that. Like we're not marketing anymore. Right? He's not a brilliant marketer. He's a brilliant hype man. Yeah. And there's a difference. And like, Elon Musk and the Cybertruck, can you build hype? Like we're past marketing. But I think, and how does this intersects with our conversation, is when we look at training, the old guard that didn't have, and I grew up training before cell phones. I didn't get an Instagram account until I was 22. I was 6 foot 240. I was lifting decently heavy with no incentive other than just to lift heavier. There was reluctancy in the early days because it's like, well, I grew up with, it was Louis and Poliquin and Czech and, Mike Boyle and these guys. And like, there was and Charlie Francis, there was a purity to what these guys were doing that, seemed like the camera and social media took away from it. And you can use that as a crutch. You can lean on that and be like, no, that's social media crap. But then you watch, Louis, rest in peace, or you watch what Dave's doing with Elite FTS, or, you watch guys like, Matty Nickel, or, the best are even Yo Murph, right? Like you see the best now understanding that this is we're getting back to the art,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's how you can tell the story of the art form. And so I think we've come full circle from like the art is now the thing that gets the eyeballs. So it's not marketing, it's not hype. It's like actually who's doing this really, really well. Like, you know, Van Gogh didn't have to, you know, have a YouTube channel to be like, and obviously he wasn't like super prolific until after he died, but it's like, are you an artist, not a marketer, right? Like, so I think spending time disproportionately now on your craft and just sharing the story of that is what is winning.
Sure.
And will continue to win into, you know, the next cycle of social media, and I'm going to air quote marketing for sake of ease. But I think that's where, you know, that's where I think a lot of people have this just a really naive, really, I don't want to say lazy, but like, look, there are other you do not want to be as successful or impact as many people or whatever your metric is as much as you think you do if you're using some lazy excuse to say that like, oh, I'm not good at it. It's like, well, fuck, like we all work in an industry where the whole point of what we do is to get people better at something that they're not good at. We all know principles of getting someone, oh, this person's bad at squatting. Like, okay, I'm really good at getting people really good at squatting. Like I take pride in that. It's like, you know how to like get better at shit. And you find 1,000,001 reasons to not. It's like, oh, like maybe you actually don't want to be really good at this.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if you can set up a business that gets you, you know, gives you some freedom that allows you to, you know, sit back and polish your craft and work on the art of it, then you're actually invested. Like you're doing what, like, yeah, I you know, when I played competitive sports, I didn't want to run in the off season. I hated it. I could think of 1,000 reasons of why I shouldn't, but I knew it would make me better, so I did that. And wouldn't you know, I got better. It's like, it's the same thing with the social media. It's like, you know, you're gonna, and it's kind of open ended to anyone who's listening to this who has a reluctancy against utilizing social media as a storytelling
this is hand up
media.
accountability to me right here.
Well,
Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of like, okay, like you do you not want you are telling me by your actions, and like, I know this is not me like for holding you to task, but it's a conversation I have often, because it's like I focus so much on the art, right? I've invested I'll one time I'll just tell you the lengths I've gone to be in the room with the best athletes in the world, like how much of my own money I've spent to just be present with the best in the world, and because it's not a right. Like, it should be a privilege. Like, it should be gate kept. Like, these people are like, when you respect what you're seeing, when you understand how rare like a creature this is, like, you know, people spend tens of thousands of dollars to go somewhere to see like a rhinoceros because there's only a handful in the world. It's like, yeah, you got a guy who's, you know, 350 running a sub 4 or running a sub 540. Like, that might as well be extinct. Like, that guy is like one of a handful of creatures on the planet that can do that. So it's you know, I think if you get away from this very antiquated notion that social media is somehow antithetical to the art form, and you realize that it's embracing the art form, and if your focus is the art form, then that's how you start to grow. And I think that's where our guys do so well, you know, by their own right, and so well for and with us, is because they're, you know, like the results they're getting are ridiculous. Like, they focus on the art form all day. They coach people all day. And it's like, yeah, this guy like couldn't lift his arm a week ago, and he was supposed to get like 4 surgeries, and now like full range of motion, active, passive, active, resisted, pain-free. And like, they put that up, and they're like, okay, they're just sharing how good they are at the art of this. And then, you know, we come in and go, hey, this guy teaches this course that's purely about the art of what we're doing. And so I think that's it. And you know, there is obviously still room for, like we talked about before, like, you know, hype and entertainment and all that stuff. Like, yeah, people value that, right? Like, that's why box office, like, so Marvel, they're still making fucking comic book movies, and will in infinity, because like there's room for that. It's just our focus primarily is just on the art. And I think for those people who struggle with social media, they think it impurifies the art of what we do. But it's if your focus, if your passion is at the art form level, the story is what's going to sell. And just get really, really good at it, because I think there's also this myth that social media is like so diluted. It's like, nah, not with people that are good, right? Like it's pretty lonely group up there of people who are actually good. It's quite literally the definition of being good and great is that you're better than the majority of other people at something. So that's where focusing on the art form comes in. It's like, if word gets out that you're really good at this, you're actually playing at an echelon that you're at an altitude that not many people can get to. It's thin air and it's thin company. So like you don't have it's not as competitive as people think. It's like, oh, it's oversaturated. It's like, really? You ever seen videos of the summit at Everest? There's not many people there. Only the good ones.
Yep. That makes total sense. And honestly, it makes me, again, hand up accountability. Not that you're like, speaking directly at me, but that spoke at me a lot. And it makes sense too why, your sign off on your social media is big love with the heart. Like you're putting your heart and soul into the art form. So that's, it's very, very relatable and very, very TLDR, but very informative. So hopefully people take something out of that. I know I did. I put some notes down on my phone, so thank you. Also, I think one of the best artists / wordsmiths out there works for you guys, in our buddy Thayer. He's all about painting a good picture. But the last little bit here that I just kind of wanted to run through as I'm getting a hamstring cramp is, what, I guess, where do you see this? Where do you, so much has changed in the 2 years since we last spoke, or a year and a half, whatever. Do you see another leap forward like we've gone through now? And if so, do you have any sort of predictability on like what is to come? I know you have your own thing and you don't need to share anything that, you guys are working on, but like, what does your mind look forward to? Because I would probably put a lot of money on it that you are already planning far ahead. So is there something that you are kind of looking forward to, or that you envisioned happening in our space? Or just growth, I guess.
I don't know if I'm I don't think I see any massive leaps, maybe because I'm too close to the problem. And I don't want to act as an elected official of the industry. It's the industry is just like a bunch of silly people doing silly things. And I'm like potentially the silliest doing the silliest of things. Yeah, I don't know. There's this adage, I forget what book I read it from. So I'm just checking a stack of books next to my desk to see if I can be prompted. Like one of the axioms that I think was super helpful when we got into the education space was, and I've used this to model the business, and it's something along the lines, if you want a business that'll last 25 years, go see what worked 25 years ago. Right. So there is like a certain cyclical nature to things that we do. There's certain immutable principles of scale to anything that you do. So, in the education space, like, we were one of the first to introduce lab sections. Why? Because when I went to university, I did best in the courses that had labs attached to it. Sure. Right. Like a GA or a TA that you could actually engage with, that sat in on the lecture material, that knew the professor, that you could help dissect and apply some things. And like, I'm talking like, I had history and political science labs. I had, communication labs. I had, obviously exercise science and biomechanics labs as well. But like, and that idea of having labs in pre-script courses as a standard, that was not always the standard. We taught pre-script level 1 for years without labs. But I started to think about this axiom of, if you want a business to last 25 years, do something that worked 25 years ago. And I was like, well, fuck, okay. Like, let me take a hard look at what I liked when I was in school. So in understanding that, right, like there is going to be a corporatization of these freelance, I don't want to say one-offs per se, but, we had a list of guys at the top of the hour, Israel obviously one of them,
Mm-hmm.
Cass, obviously another, what we do at Prescript, and you could put in, you could put Luke Tulloch into the mix. You could throw Luke Lehman into the mix. And I definitely would. Like,
Sure.
there was a decentralization of fitness education because kinesiology undergrads are a joke when it comes to application, but like undergrad, like fuck, dude. I mean, it's so easy to laugh at that as someone who's worked in the industry. But like, I could imagine being, a lead developer in a Silicon Valley startup company that might be, pre-launch or pre-IPO or might be acquired. And I run like a dev team of like 30 or 40 people, and I need to hire a new kid out of undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
What a nightmare that would be. Because like the first 2 years of that kid's undergrad are completely useless in the field, because now the acquisition of new technology is at a rate of like every 3 months. So it's like this guy's complete. Yeah, he might have some of the soft skills and understand like the anatomy of the computer or the binary code or Python or Ruby Red or whatever, CSS, HTML. But from an application standpoint, like, you're dealing with an infant, like you're wiping noses, because it's like you have this evolving infrastructure on the cutting edge, and they've been taught things, if you're lucky, taught things that are 4 years old. If you're realistic, probably 2 decades old. And so it's not a problem that's exclusive to fitness, which I think is something that's also really troubling with the industry, is like whether it's human behavior and fitness. And like, don't get me wrong, adding trend into the mix makes things a little bit different, but maybe just makes it a little bit easier to spot. It's like, if anyone's worked in any other industry, it's the same problem. Like, it's just people in this arena. Circling back to the point, I think you're going to start to see a lot of corporatization, right? Things just tend in this world, and not entirely true of like the world at large, but things tend to organize, right? So even though we all started off kind of getting our foothold in this, education space, we started around 2016. Not to say that we were the first. Obviously, there's plenty that came before us. Charles is one that I think is a pioneer. His impact, I don't think will ever be truly realized on the industry. But what we're seeing now, and I can tell you this from our, like, you have to corporatize. Because like that, because you need to adopt some immutable principles of scale in business if your goal is to, reach and impact as many people as you want, right? And I think in the place we are in, and understanding kind of like how our company and the products and services we provide, how that actually impacts the general population. Like, we have probably close to 10,000 coaches that we've got, that we've educated over the past 7-8 years.
Wow.
But each one of those 10,000 has anywhere. I mean, we have some guys that have gone through our courses that alone have 50,000 subscribers on some exercise program, and get a message and be like, hey man, like I changed up my programming after taking your course, and I had like a lot of positive feedback from my users on my app, adding this and adding that and taking this away. I got a lot of people message me like, oh, this block of this program used to cause me like a ton of knee pain. I always like wanted to tough it out. Now, based off the exercise and the changes you made, like I don't get that pain anymore. Thanks. Like, we're in a position where, I spoke with this on a podcast. I actually recently had it tagged in one of my stories I totally forgot about. Back in 2018, I had a conversation with a friend of mine named Kyle Trainer. Just recently had him on the show. And I talked about this principle of like meta impact, and this idea that like, it's like a paracrine system. It's like, if you think about how little ephedrine it takes for your whole body to go into some sort of sympathetic drive state, and like that's how the hormone signaling works. It takes very little to make a massive change. And so just that alone, one student of the 10,000 made a difference to, I don't know, 50,000 people. And obviously maybe not all the users had a benefit, but that is exponential reach, right? That's scale. That's outside of that's that exponent, from the word exponential, like that's where it comes from. It's like we are operating outside of a bracket. So that's kind of like where I see it going, is like, well, we want to continue to do that. And things tend to like, look at like cities across the world hundreds of years ago that had no way of communicating, organize their cities the same fucking way. And it's like, there's a reason for that, because it's what allowed it to thrive and what allowed it to survive. So, You know, whether it's basing your business off of something that was successful 25 years ago, or basing your city off of how cities worked fucking 500 years ago. It's like there is going to be things that are cyclical. And I think one of the things that we are seeing is this corporatization. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing, right? Because I think corporates are seeing things cyclical and they're getting more personal, right? Corporates are having more of a personal look and feel to them. So when you look at big businesses, they start to feel more like, you know, influencer led, founder driven companies. And you look at the companies now that are coming up in the corporate space, how important it is to be founder led, right? That used to be looked as a detriment, like, oh, you have like there's a key man clause to your business is something that someone might hear. But it's like, you don't think there's a key man clause to Tesla? You don't think if Elon Musk walked away from Tesla, that this whole operation would just go to absolute dog shit tomorrow? Right. So I think there's the corporatization to the industry that I think is coming. And it's not good or bad. It's just a necessity of survival and general fitness. And I don't mean fitness in the way that we mean fitness, right? Like fitness in the sense of survivability of like a species or ecosystem. So yeah, I think if I had to make a prediction, and I think we, without going into too much details, are attempting to be as fast and as accurate as we can be, making decisions based off of the fitness of the company that look a lot like corporatization, while trying to keep this new generation founder driven personality and brand that we've established. And I think, you know, we've done a really good job of setting ourselves up to be able to do that successfully. So I think that's where it's headed, because that's where we came from.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, there's a reason you could still look through the rear view when you look out the windshield, right? I mean, let's be honest. So it makes total sense. But I just want to wrap up by, again, thanking you for your time. You know, I know a lot's changed in the industry over the past couple of years, but it's nice to see, you know, you guys are still crushing, doing well. You know, as I mentioned, like your team, your group is somebody that I have learned a lot from over just watching, listening, and then application. Killian says it perfectly. Learn the skill, apply the skill. And that little phrase has changed the way I train, the way I coach, the way I teach people to coach. So like just literally learning from this has revamped how I can help people make money, to put it bluntly. So thank you guys for that. But is there any PS coming up that we can, you know, shout out right now? I know you have the one coming up in June, you said, right?
Yeah, so that's L3. So L3 is going to be obviously exclusive to those L2 students. Now, currently, we have a couple of in-person events. So we're hosting our barbell course in California, in SoCal, the the fourth weekend of March. And the week prior to that, we're hosting L1 in person, which will also have a digital semester. And we're doing that with Mind Pump. So we're only going to be doing our in-person. Yeah. So it's a 3-day event with Mind Pump leading the first day, and then us doing our L1 in person, which then leads into an L1 online starting the week after. So if you wanted to register for just the online version of the L1, you can do that. If you head over to www.pre-script.com/mind-pump-PSL1, bit of a mouthful, you can sign up for that. That's going to be a ton of fun. It's always going to be a note to California. That's actually, you know, we started all of this about 3-4 blocks away from the Mind Pump studio 8-9 years ago. So it's always a nice homecoming for that. And then, the next semester of L1 online, that's not the Mind Pump one, starts up in May. If you are interested in that, it's actually the only time we offer a discount is in our opt-in page. So if you go to the homepage of the Prescript website, pre-script.com, and you hit the PSL1 tab on the top right, it'll take you to a list where if you put your email down, you actually get the only discount that we offer by putting your name on that list. That semester will kick off about mid-March, and that email will go out for registration, and that opt-in list will close probably by mid-March. So once the sales page is up and the opt-in list is down, we kind of lost a chance to save on that. So it's really the only sale we have on it is getting your email on that list ASAP.
Sweet. Well, big man, appreciate you. As always, you know, best of luck to you. I'll extend the invite again if you guys are in Chicago to get some grub. But yeah, man, keep doing good things. And again, I always appreciate the willingness to share, what you guys do. So it's, like I said, it's helped me. I'm sure it's helped many other people as well. So thanks,
Yeah,
Doug.
appreciate it, man. Yeah, if you're ever in the Toronto area, look me up.